Welcome back to True Echo, where every story reveals a deeper truth. Today's story isn't just about diamonds, it's about dignity. When a black woman walked into a luxury jewelry store, she was humiliated in front of wealthy clients, dismissed as if she didn't belong. What the store manager didn't realize: that woman owned the company. What happened next left everyone speechless. Stay with us, this story will shake you. Jessica Carter stood quietly at the entrance of Diamond Luxe Beverly Hills, her breath caught in her throat as the crisp air-conditioned breeze swept over her. She wore a modest navy blazer, pressed slacks, and a pair of plain leather flats. On her wrist shimmered a weathered silver bracelet, her grandmother's. Her car, a sun-faded 2004 Toyota Corolla, had barely blended into the row of gleaming Bentleys and Porsches lined along Rodeo Drive. She was invisible to most. And yet, in just a few minutes, the entire store would never forget her. Inside, Rebecca Wilson, the boutique manager with icy blonde hair and an even colder demeanor, was entertaining a wealthy couple. She glanced up as the automatic doors chimed. Her eyes landed on Jessica and instantly narrowed. She barely tried to hide her contempt. There was no greeting, no polite acknowledgement, just a disapproving once-over from head to toe. Rebecca didn't see a potential client. She saw a problem. Jessica approached the central display case and politely said, "I'd like to see the Aurora collection." Rebecca's perfectly manicured hands froze mid-air. That wasn't a request she was expecting from someone dressed like Jessica. The Aurora collection wasn't just high-end, it was elite. Pieces priced in the hundreds of thousands, some even over $1 million. Celebrities and royalty wore them. Not people who drove up in a beat-up Toyota. "We don't show Aurora without an appointment or credentials," Rebecca said coolly. "Perhaps you'd like to see our fashion line under $500. Jessica didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. She stood her ground, her voice calm but unmistakably authoritative. "I understand Aurora. And I'd still like to see it." Rebecca's lips curled into a smug smile. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to leave the premises before I call security. You're clearly not here to make a serious purchase." Jessica exhaled slowly, her hand brushing against the silver bracelet on her wrist. The same one her grandmother gave her the night before she died. "Go ahead," Jessica said softly, pulling out her phone. "But before you call anyone, let me make a quick call of my own." Rebecca rolled her eyes and reached for the store's phone, already halfway through dialing security. "This is absurd," she muttered under her breath. "These people think they can just walk in anywhere these days." But Jessica didn't flinch. She pressed a contact on her screen and held her phone to her ear. Her voice remained low, deliberate, steady, cutting through the heavy air like a knife. "Hello, this is Jessica Carter. I'm at the Beverly Hills store. Please inform the board that I need an emergency meeting, immediately." The sound of that name dropped like a thunderclap. Jessica Carter. Kevin Brown, the young assistant manager behind the counter, blinked in disbelief. His mind raced back to a company newsletter just a few weeks ago, Jessica Carter, founder and CEO of Diamond Luxe. He had memorized her face. A woman hailed in Forbes, featured in Vogue, praised as one of the top 10 female entrepreneurs in the country. He looked again at the woman standing in front of him, and it hit him like lightning. That was her. Ashley Tran, the petite sales associate who had watched the whole encounter unfold, nearly dropped her notepad. Her eyes widened as the memory came rushing back, the internal email showcasing the Aurora collection with a photo of Jessica Carter beside it. The very collection Rebecca had just forbidden her from seeing. Rebecca froze, the receiver still in her hand. The name she had just heard didn't register at first. But as Jessica's tone grew firmer, as the employee's expressions shifted from confusion to realization, something in Rebecca's mind clicked. Her expression slowly morphed from irritation to dawning horror. Jessica didn't look at her. She didn't have to. Her voice carried through the boutique, calm yet commanding. "No, I won't wait for a callback. I've just been publicly humiliated in my own flagship store by a manager who assumed I was a thief, because of the way I look. The silence was deafening. Kevin's hands trembled behind the counter. Ashley's lips parted, unable to speak. Marcus Jones, the stoic security guard who had stood just a few feet away during the confrontation, now looked on with narrowed eyes, his entire posture shifting to one of protective readiness. Rebecca, who moments earlier had threatened to call the police, now seemed to shrink behind the counter. Her voice cracked. "Wait. Jessica Carter. You're her." Jessica finally turned toward her, eyes cold and unblinking. "I gave you a chance to treat me with respect. Not as a CEO. Not as a millionaire. Just as a customer. A human being." The store erupted with hushed murmurs. A few guests, including a younger couple browsing nearby, quickly pulled out their phones and began recording. The tension was too real, too raw to look away. Rebecca's carefully painted face turned ghost white. I didn't know. Miss Carter, Jessica held up a hand, silencing her instantly. "That's the problem. You never ask. You assume. You judge. You gatekeep. This store, my store, was supposed to be the opposite of what happened today." At that moment, the double glass doors opened and Mr. and Mrs. Anderson stepped in, a wealthy longtime couple Rebecca had always fawned over. But they froze in the doorway when they saw the scene, phones raised, mouths slightly open, all attention focused on Jessica Carter. Rebecca turned toward them as if seeking some kind of support. "Mr. Anderson, please, you know me. This is just a misunderstanding." But Mrs. Anderson looked her up and down, then turned toward Jessica. "Are you the owner?" Jessica nodded. "Yes. I am." Mrs. Anderson gave a curt nod, her tone flat but firm. "Then I support you. No misunderstanding excuses how she treated you." Rebecca's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. Her last illusion of social protection had crumbled in an instant. Jessica stepped forward now, turning to Kevin, Ashley, and Marcus. "You three," she said. "What did you think while watching all of this?" Kevin's voice shook. "I wanted to say something, Miss Carter. But, Rebecca, she threatens our jobs. All the time." Ashley's eyes filled with tears. "She once scolded me in front of a customer, just for helping an elderly black woman who couldn't speak English clearly." Jessica nodded solemnly. "Thank you for your honesty." "And Marcus?" The security guard stood tall. "Ma'am, I've been here 5 years. I've watched her turn away people because of how they looked. But I never had proof. Until today." Jessica turned slowly to Rebecca, who had backed up into the corner of the showroom, trembling. "This morning," she said, "you told me to leave. You accused me of being a thief. You tried to weaponize the police against me." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Rebecca Wilson, as of this moment, you are relieved of your duties as manager of Diamond Luxe Beverly Hills." Rebecca gasped, as if those words alone were a physical blow. "No, please, Jessica, Miss Carter, I didn't mean it. I have a daughter. I have bills, I'll take training classes, You've had years to change," Jessica said coldly. "You chose not to." Rebecca sank to her knees, sobbing now, her perfectly styled hair tumbling around her shoulders. "Please. Don't ruin my life." Jessica's stare was steel. "You ruined it the moment you decided to treat people like they were less than you." She turned to Marcus. "Escort her out. Quietly." As Marcus gently but firmly guided Rebecca toward the door, a round of quiet applause broke out. From Kevin. From Ashley. From guests who had once feared being profiled or mistreated. One woman whispered, "Finally." Someone stood up. Jessica didn't smile. "Not yet." She simply adjusted her bracelet and exhaled. This was only the beginning. As the doors closed behind Rebecca Wilson, the showroom of Diamond Luxe Beverly Hills fell into a strange, reverent silence. It was as though the building itself had exhaled for the first time in years. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone, from guests to staff, stared at the woman now standing in the center of it all, Jessica Carter. Not just a CEO, not just a powerful woman, but a symbol of what dignity looks like when it's pushed, tested, and still stands tall. Jessica turned slowly, taking in every inch of the store she had designed herself, down to the velvet chairs, the chandelier lights, the polished floors that had once been walked on by Oscar winners and royalty. And yet, in all its beauty, the store had allowed rot to grow beneath its foundation. She approached the central counter where Kevin Brown, still visibly shaken, stood paralyzed behind the register. Jessica looked at him and said with calm strength, "Kevin." "Yes, ma'am," he answered quickly, voice tight with nervousness. "Today, when it mattered, you didn't add to the harm. You didn't stay entirely silent either. I saw the hesitation. The conflict. That matters to me." His eyes widened. "I'm appointing you interim manager. Effective immediately." The breath Kevin didn't realize he was holding came out in a gasp. "Wait, me. You have empathy. You know our policies. You just needed permission to act on what you already knew was right," she said. Kevin's voice broke. "Thank you. I won't let you down." Jessica nodded once, firmly. Then she looked toward Ashley Tran, the young associate who had trembled at the register while quietly standing her ground. "And Ashley," Jessica continued, "I saw how you tried to keep your head down but couldn't hide your compassion. You treated me with humanity even when you were scared." Ashley's hands flew to her mouth. She didn't speak, she simply began to cry. The soft kind of crying that comes not from sadness, but from sheer relief. From the feeling of finally being seen. "You're now assistant manager," Jessica said gently. "And you'll be helping Kevin rebuild this store's culture." Ashley nodded through tears, barely able to whisper, "Thank you, Miss Carter." Jessica turned to Marcus Jones, the stoic security guard who had stepped in, not by barking orders or brandishing power, but by using calm logic to challenge a flawed command. "Marcus," she said. "Yes, ma'am. You showed professionalism, courage, and an understanding of what our values truly mean. For that, you'll receive a promotion and a raise. I also want you to head security training for all stores nationwide." Marcus, ever reserved, merely nodded. But the pride in his posture was unmistakable. Then Jessica turned to the entire staff, lifting her voice just enough to carry across the room. "Let me be clear," she said. "This store will never again be a place where someone is judged by the car they drive or the color of their skin. If any employee feels like they are being forced to follow orders that go against our values, you come to me. Personally." Kevin, Ashley, and Marcus stood behind her now like a new guard rising from the ashes of the old one. In the next 48 hours, there will be a full audit. A culture review. And yes, mandatory training for every remaining staff member. Not just here, but at all 47 locations across the country. Several guests in the store began clapping softly. The applause grew steadily until it filled the space, no longer just in celebration, but in agreement, with what the brand truly stood for. That was when Jessica finally allowed herself to smile. Not for show. Not to prove a point. But because, despite everything, she believed redemption was possible, if the roots were cleaned and nurtured. Just then, a young black girl walked into the store with her mother. She couldn't have been older than 9. Her eyes lit up as she looked around at the glittering cases. Then she saw Jessica, standing tall and strong in the center of the store, and whispered to her mother, "Is that the lady from the video?" Her mother nodded slowly. "Yes, baby. That's her." Jessica knelt down, her smile softening. "Hi there," she said. The little girl looked up at her, shy but brave. "I want to own a store like this one day." Jessica's eyes gleamed. "And you will. And when you do, don't ever let anyone tell you you don't belong." It was in that moment, kneeling, speaking to the next generation, that Jessica realized the confrontation with Rebecca wasn't just about a necklace or a display case. It was about legacy. Standing, Jessica glanced over at the Aurora collection, still locked behind its glass walls. "Let's leave it closed today," she said. "We're not selling jewelry right now. We're restoring trust." Kevin and Ashley nodded behind her. Jessica Carter didn't just reclaim her authority that day, she rewrote the rules of who holds it, how it must be wielded, and what happens when you finally call injustice by its name. The following morning, Jessica Carter sat alone in the back office of the Beverly Hills Diamond Luxe boutique, her boutique, sipping coffee from a paper cup and scanning the flood of notifications lighting up her phone. She hadn't intended for any of this to go viral. But it had. Overnight, customer-recorded videos of her confrontation with Rebecca Wilson had exploded across social media platforms. A clip of Jessica saying, "I'm Jessica Carter, and this is my store," had already surpassed 3 million views on TikTok and had been shared by multiple celebrities on Twitter and Instagram. One repost simply read, "This is what real leadership looks like. Salute to Jessica Carter." Another said, "Don't judge the car, don't judge the clothes, judge the character." National news outlets picked up the story. "Black CEO denied service in her own store," blared headlines. It was being compared to viral cases of discrimination at coffee chains and clothing retailers, but this time, the victim wasn't just a customer. She was the founder. Jessica's assistant, Monica, knocked once before peeking in. "They're ready for you. Press, customers, staff. And yes, CNN's here too." Jessica stood, exhaled, and adjusted her blazer. She wasn't nervous. But she was deliberate. Every word she would speak mattered, not just for Diamond Luxe, but for every person who'd ever been turned away, belittled, or humiliated by someone in power who thought they could get away with it. Out on the main showroom floor, a podium had been set up in front of the Aurora display. Kevin and Ashley stood on either side of it, their expressions solemn but proud. Behind them stood the entire staff, diverse in age, race, and background, waiting not just for instructions, but for inspiration. Jessica approached the microphone. Cameras clicked. Recorders rolled. Phones tilted into place. She began without notes. "Yesterday, in this very store, I was told I didn't belong," she said. "Not by a stranger on the street. Not by a competitor. But by someone wearing a Diamond Luxe name tag." A murmur ran through the crowd. "I was told I looked like a thief. That I wasn't welcome. That I would be removed by security. All because I didn't fit the image someone decided was worthy of respect." Jessica let that settle before continuing. "But let me be clear, this is not a story about a rude manager. This is about something much deeper, something that happens every day in places where the doors are shiny, the diamonds are real, but the values are hollow." She looked across the crowd, her voice unwavering. "I built Diamond Luxe to reflect the dignity of every person who walks through its doors. You shouldn't need a Chanel bag or a luxury car to deserve kindness. You shouldn't need light skin or elite status to be treated like you matter." The room had gone still. "I started this company out of a dream, one forged in the back of a greasy Atlanta diner, where I waited tables during the day and studied at night. Where people talked over me, not to me. Where I was seen, but not acknowledged. Heard, but never listened to. And I promised myself, one day, if I ever had power, would use it to protect dignity, not deny it." She paused to let the applause build, and this time, it did. From the staff. From the press. Even from the customers who had come back just to witness her speech. Jessica continued. Rebecca Wilson made a choice. She used her authority to judge others by appearances. But this company will never be built on fear. It will be built on fairness. She then turned to Kevin. This man, she said, chose conscience over silence. That's leadership. To Ashley. This woman showed kindness under pressure. That's integrity. To Marcus. This man refused to follow an unjust order. That's courage. Then she looked beyond the cameras, beyond the marble walls and glittering jewelry, to the larger public watching from behind their screens. And to every little girl who saw that video, who thought, maybe I don't belong in those places, maybe people like me will always be turned away, I want you to know something. You do belong. You always did. Don't let anyone, in a suit or in a uniform, convince you otherwise. The applause now roared through the space. Jessica stepped away from the mic. No dramatic mic drop. No rehearsed theatrics. Just quiet, resounding strength. As she walked back toward the counter, reporters scrambled to ask follow-ups. One called out, Jessica, what do you think is Diamond Lux's greatest value? She paused only for a second. Dignity, she replied. It's rarer than diamonds, and far more valuable. By the end of that press conference, Diamond Lux wasn't just a jewelry brand anymore, it had become a symbol. For justice. For dignity. For the quiet strength of those who refuse to bow to old money gatekeeping. But what Jessica Carter understood better than anyone else was that public applause doesn't always equal deep change. As she returned to headquarters that same evening, the air in the executive suite felt different. Tighter. Uneasy. Her executive assistant, Monica, greeted her with a hesitant expression. The board's waiting in the glass room. Half are excited. The other half, not so much. Jessica gave a tight nod. Let's go in. Inside the sleek boardroom, every face turned as she entered. The long oval table gleamed beneath the modern chandelier. Diamond Lux's top executives, mostly white men and a few women, sat stone-faced, their polished watches and pressed suits as pristine as the company's showroom floors. Franklin Donahue, COO and one of the original investors, cleared his throat. Jessica, he began, we've all seen the video. And your speech. Powerful. Really. But. Jessica tilted her head. But now the brand is all over the media for the wrong reasons, he said carefully. We're trending for internal dysfunction. That's bad for investor confidence. Another board member chimed in. There are questions about whether you should have handled it internally instead of going viral. Maybe issued a quiet termination, a press release. Nothing so public. Jessica's jaw tightened. So I should have let a woman get away with discrimination, again, so our image wouldn't take a hit? Franklin shrugged. You're the face of Diamond Lux. Some people now see the brand as politicized. We've even had a few high-profile clients cancel orders. Jessica leaned forward. Let me tell you something. If someone cancels their order because a black CEO stood up against racism in her own store, then that's a customer I'm proud to lose. Silence. She stood now, commanding the room. You want to talk about image? Let's talk about the foundation we pretend to stand on, respect, fairness, excellence. Either those values are real, or we're just selling polished lies behind glass. A younger board member, a Latina VP named Selena Ortiz, spoke up gently, I support you, Jessica. But let's be real, if we make too many changes too fast, some of the old clients will walk. Jessica looked at her, then at every face in the room. Then we make room for new ones. People who want luxury with integrity. They didn't clap. They didn't object either. And Jessica took that as her cue to move forward. Within 48 hours, she issued a company-wide mandate. All 47 Diamond Lux stores would undergo full equity and inclusion audits. Mandatory diversity and sensitivity training would be implemented quarterly, not annually. Any employee with multiple internal complaints for discriminatory behavior would be subject to immediate review by an ethics panel, no exceptions. And most importantly, any customer turned away due to bias could submit a direct complaint to the office of CEO, hers. Meanwhile, social media continued to erupt. On Twitter, Jessica Carter is the CEO we didn't know we needed. You can't cancel class. That woman is pure class. Imagine judging the owner of the store. What a lesson in humility. But not everyone cheered. Some called the move too woke. Others said she was weaponizing race to gain attention. A few media outlets tried to paint the story as a PR stunt. Jessica didn't respond to any of them. She didn't need to. Instead, she spent her days personally visiting branches. Speaking to employees. Listening. Taking notes. Sitting beside janitors and senior stylists alike, asking them what they saw, how they felt, what they wished would change. At the Atlanta branch, her hometown, an older black man, a night janitor, told her with tears in his eyes, "Miss Carter, I used to mop the floors here and pray no one looked at me like I was trespassing. After what you did, I walk with my head high." At the New York store, a teenage intern told her, "I used to think success meant acting like them. You showed me I don't have to change who I am." But in Los Angeles, something else was brewing. An anonymous email had landed in Jessica's inbox, unsigned but alarming. She wasn't the only one. Check your Chicago branch. Then Dallas. You'll see. Jessica stared at it for a long moment. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Could Rebecca Wilson be the tip of a much larger problem? Had her company been harboring pockets of silent cruelty, out of sight, behind polished counters and luxury branding, while she trusted good intentions to be enough? Her heart sank. She thought back to the look on Rebecca's face. The arrogance. The entitlement. The ease with which she tried to call the police. Rebecca hadn't acted alone. She'd simply operated in a system that allowed her to believe she'd never be challenged. Jessica's phone buzzed. It was Monica. "You've got CBS, NPR, and Essence requesting interviews," she said. Also, 2 more anonymous emails just came in. Both mentioned the same thing, a regional manager in Dallas. Jessica narrowed her eyes. It wasn't over. The real storm, the systemic storm, was just beginning. Jessica Carter sat at the head of a narrow, dimly lit conference table inside the Dallas Diamond Luxe regional office. Her fingers lightly tapped the worn leather of her notebook. Across from her sat 3 employees, 2 sales associates and 1 former assistant manager, each of them visibly nervous. Not because she was the CEO, but because they were about to say out loud what too many had been forced to keep silent for years. "This is off the record," she told them gently. "But it's also your chance to help me clean this company from the inside out. Whatever you say here, I will hear it, and I will act." It was the 3rd stop in a confidential internal audit she had initiated following the anonymous emails. And by now, a pattern had started to emerge, one more disturbing than even she had imagined. The young woman across from her, Nina Caldwell, finally spoke up. Her voice shook. "Regional Manager Troy Fields, he'd tell us who to focus on. Usually older white couples. Anyone with luxury logos. But if a black woman walked in alone, especially if she was dressed modestly, we were told to keep an eye on them, or steer them toward the costume jewelry. I tried to push back once, and he said, 'This isn't a charity. We have a brand to protect.'" Jessica felt her stomach turn. Another former employee added, "He used to say, if they can afford it, they'll make it known. Like respect had to be earned through appearance." The third, a quiet man with a close-cut beard, nodded gravely. "A few of us brought it up to HR. Nothing changed. In fact, some of us had our hours cut after that." Jessica's voice remained even, but her words were sharp. "You're telling me there were multiple complaints, and they went unanswered?" The group nodded in unison. Jessica sat back, folding her arms. She didn't need to hear more, not to believe them. She knew that tone. That quiet fatigue. It mirrored her own expression the morning Rebecca Wilson had demanded she be thrown out of her own store. Diamond Luxe had become what she'd fought so hard to prevent. A place where perception overruled principle. Where luxury had started to mean exclusion. She flew back to headquarters that night with a new resolve, eyes burning with quiet fury. That same week, she convened an emergency meeting, not with the board, not with legal, but with a hand-selected ethics committee of trusted, diverse employees from multiple levels of the company. They reviewed every complaint lodged over the past 3 years. Patterns emerged. In New York, a manager who routinely overlooked Latina employees for promotions. In Miami, a subtle but strategic discouragement of hiring applicants with African or Caribbean names. In Las Vegas, a stylist reprimanded for speaking too informally with a Middle Eastern couple, who turned out to be VIP clients. Jessica was stunned. Diamond Luxe hadn't just failed some customers. It had failed itself. That night, she drafted what would become the most controversial and defining move of her career. The Carter Protocol. It would require all regional managers to undergo third-party evaluations biannually. Every HR complaint involving bias to be reviewed by a rotating independent diversity panel. Whistleblower protections with anonymity guaranteed. Store cameras and audio logs to be periodically reviewed, not to spy, but to audit behavior for integrity breaches. And finally, any regional manager with 2 substantiated bias incidents would be permanently barred from holding leadership at Diamond Luxe. She released the memo internally before making it public. The reactions were immediate. Some corporate leaders praised her courage. Others sent polite but pointed emails suggesting she was overcorrecting. And then came the letter. Slipped into her office under the door. Typed. No signature. Just a few lines. You want to burn down what you built because a few feelings got hurt? Fine. Just know, if you keep digging, you might lose your crown jewel. Not everyone's going to follow your little revolution. Jessica stared at it, her hands steady but her pulse climbing. A threat. She folded the note and slipped it into her drawer. If this was war, she would fight it like she always had, not with noise or fear, but with clarity, action, and unshakable resolve. The next day, she walked into the Beverly Hills flagship store once again, this time greeted with sincere smiles, warmth, and admiration. Ashley now wore her new name badge, assistant manager. Kevin had built a new training system modeled on fairness and personalization. Marcus stood at the entrance like a sentinel of justice. And the Aurora necklace? It had been placed in a separate case, with a new inscription. It read, "Everyone deserves to shine." Jessica stood before it, her reflection shimmering in the glass, the old silver bracelet still around her wrist. They had tried to make her small. They had tried to protect a system built on appearance. But the revolution was no longer coming. It had already begun. 2 weeks later, Jessica Carter stood backstage at the Diamond Luxe Annual Shareholder Summit in Chicago. The ballroom, an opulent display of chandeliers and gold trim, had been transformed into a media event, journalists, investors, and top clients all waiting to hear her address what the press now called the Aurora Reformation. But Jessica knew what this really was. A trial. Not in a court of law, but in the court of elite opinion, where profit often stood in direct conflict with principle. Where billion-dollar legacies could be applauded one day, and stripped the next for daring to challenge the status quo. She could feel the tension as she walked out onto the stage. No script. No teleprompter. Just her, the truth, and the storm she'd stirred. The applause was polite. Controlled. A few scattered cheers from employees in the back. But the front rows, where the major investors and founding partners sat, remained stiff. Silent. Appraising. Jessica stepped to the mic. 3 weeks ago, she began, I walked into a store I built from nothing, and was told I didn't belong. A pause. Some heads nodded. Others remained stoic. And what followed, she continued, was not just a viral moment. It was a mirror held up to all of us. She then laid out the audit results. The stories from Dallas. The uncovered complaints. The hidden rot beneath the surface. She didn't sensationalize. She didn't accuse blindly. She showed the facts. Diamond Luxe has grown on the backs of hardworking employees and the trust of customers from every walk of life. We cannot call ourselves a luxury brand if that luxury is guarded by prejudice. Then she unveiled the Carter Protocol, point by point, on a massive screen behind her. The room shifted. Some murmurs. Some jaw clenches. One executive audibly scoffed when she got to the part about whistleblower protections. Then came the real test. Jessica looked directly at the front row, at Franklin Donahue and the other conservative stakeholders who had already floated rumors of removing emotional leadership in private back channels. I understand some of you fear we're becoming too political, she said calmly. That by standing for dignity, we might lose clients. Let me ask you this, what kind of client are we desperate to keep if they walk away because we treat others fairly? Silence. She leaned forward slightly. If this costs us a few buyers who believe respect is negotiable, then good riddance. We're not selling just diamonds. We're selling a reflection of who we are. And if that reflection is corrupted, no cut or clarity can ever fix it. There it was. The line. Jessica had just risked alienating powerful allies. And then. A voice rose from the back. I support her. Heads turned. It was Mrs. Anderson, the longtime client from Beverly Hills who had witnessed the Rebecca Wilson incident. She stood, raising her hand. I've shopped with Diamond Luxe for years, she said. And I have never been more proud than the day I saw the owner of this company demand the same respect for herself that she's always given her customers. Another hand went up. A black gentleman in a tailored gray suit. I'm CEO of a logistics firm in Atlanta. I used to buy gifts here in secret. Not anymore. Then a younger woman in the middle row, possibly a journalist, you just made Diamond Luxe mean something. You made it matter. Applause began softly, but grew. From the back first. From the employees. The staff. Then from middle-tier investors. A few top clients stood. The applause swelled. And yet, Franklin remained seated. He stood only when the room fell quiet again, raising a hand for the mic. Jessica handed it to him without hesitation. He looked her over carefully. Jessica. I won't lie. I don't like change. And I don't like that we're trending for anything other than sales. But I've been in this business long enough to know what happens when you bet against the truth. He turned to the crowd. I vote in favor of the Carter Protocol. Gasps. Applause. A few grumbles from the old guard, but not a word of dissent loud enough to stop the tide. The motion passed unanimously. Jessica exhaled quietly. Later, as the summit ended, Franklin approached her privately. You're walking a fine line, he said. But if you can make principle profitable, you might just rewrite the industry. I'm not trying to rewrite it, Jessica replied. I'm trying to fix what should have never been broken. Outside the venue, dozens of employees gathered as she stepped onto the sidewalk. One young black intern approached, eyes full of awe. Miss Carter, she said, I didn't know I could belong in a place like this until I saw you speak. Jessica smiled softly, touching the old silver bracelet on her wrist. You belong anywhere you walk in with your head held high. Never let anyone make you forget that. That night, Diamond Luxe's website homepage changed. No diamonds. No products. Just one simple banner. True luxury is treating every soul with value. Welcome to the new Diamond Luxe. In the glittering world of high fashion and jewelry, Jessica Carter reminded us all that the brightest diamond isn't the one behind glass, it's the one that refuses to be cut down by bias. She stood alone, challenged an entire system, and proved that real leadership isn't about power. It's about courage. As Jessica once said, "I'd rather lose a sale than sell someone short of their dignity." What would you have done in her place? Tell us in the comments below. If this story inspired you, like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to True Echo, where every story reflects a deeper truth.